The story takes place in spring, with soft pink cherry blossom petals blanketing the park. Amidst this beautiful scene, a young couple sat close together. They looked like a couple, but there was a strange tension in the air. The boy, Kominato Namito, looked clearly flustered, his gaze drifting towards the girl beside him. She was captivatingly beautiful, but something was off. She was wearing a paper bag over her head, and even stranger, her clothes seemed to be soaking wet, as if drenched in some mysterious liquid. Just then, the girl suddenly turned to him, her hand reaching out to touch his leg, her finger pointing toward his bare foot. Startled, he let out a yelp of alarm, but he quickly realized she was just wondering why he wasn't wearing shoes. He breathed a sigh of relief, his initial panic giving way to mild curiosity. Before he could answer, he remembered seeing her just a few hours ago, as he was walking into school. He was thinking about a song where the singer wished for 100 friends. He walked into his first day classroom feeling a bit lonely, wondering if he could make a friend or two here. His name was Kominato Namito, a bright-eyed first-year high school student. He smiled at the thought of the task ahead, making new friends. Feeling utterly hopeless at it, Kominato observed his classmates and noticed two students chatting amicably because of their assigned seats. Inspired, he decided that asking about seats might be his way in. But just as he was about to make his move, a bizarre thought popped into his head. The person he approached could become his girlfriend, or worse, proclaim herself a powerful demon queen. He imagined being stuck as her loyal subordinate for all of high school. Exhausted by his own paranoid fantasies, he buried his face in his hands, dreading the idea of spending his school days as someone's servant. He quickly snapped out of his overthinking when a teacher walked in, signaling the start of homeroom. Feeling somewhat relieved, he turned his attention to the introductions, hoping for a chance to find a friend with similar interests. He decided to observe his classmates, looking for someone approachable. Carefully, and with a bit of drama, he opened his eyes, half expecting to spot a hidden demon queen among them. Focusing his attention, he was immediately impressed by the smooth, confident self-introduction of a student named Aikawa. He was a polite-looking, well-built boy with a warm smile. Aikawa shared that he'd played baseball in middle school and invited anyone interested to be his friend. Kominato listened intently, feeling hopeful as others took their turns. However, when the teacher called on the next student, Kominato suddenly froze, realizing his turn was coming up. He knew a good introduction could make him more approachable, but he felt insecure about having nothing noteworthy to say. Panic began to set in as his moment drew closer. He decided to just copy the introduction of the person right before him, nervously shutting one eye and clasping his hands, silently praying the student before him would have a simple intro he could easily repeat. His attention sharpened as a beautiful yet anxious-looking girl stood up to introduce herself. She stammered, struggling to form full words, her anxiety so intense that even her name came out in fragments. The teacher addressed her as Kamiyama Samidare and encouraged her to relax and take her time. Kominato found her nervousness odd, especially when he noticed water dripping from her uniform, which only added to the mystery. After a struggle, she finally managed to say her name, clutching her soaking wet uniform. He grew more suspicious, not just of her extreme shyness, but of the strange liquid coming from her uniform. The teacher smiled gently, suggesting she remove the paper bag from her face. But as all eyes turned to her, she clutched the bag, pleading to keep it on to avoid embarrassment. This left Kominato even more confused. He'd never seen someone hide their face behind a paper bag instead of the usual options like sunglasses or a hat. Her actions, if anything, only drew more attention, leaving him completely baffled. Suddenly, he shot to his feet, startled by the water gushing from her clothes as she struggled to finish her introduction. Feeling anxious about the awkward situation and half afraid he might get splashed by her mysterious liquid, he rushed through his own introduction, sharing his hobbies and favorite subjects without much thought, and gave a respectful bow. He finished his introduction just as she turned to look at him, but the teacher told him to sit down and moved on to the next student. As the others continued their introductions, he noticed she was still standing and whispered for her to sit down. When she finally sat, water splashed from the chair, spraying his face since he was sitting right behind her. The teacher left, asking the students to prepare their writing materials for the next class. Kaminato let out a sigh of relief, feeling mentally exhausted from everything that had just happened. He saw Aikawa-kun surrounded by classmates, forming a circle of friends playing baseball, and felt disappointed that his simple introduction didn't seem to attract anyone. Suddenly, he was startled when Kamiyama-san turned to him, mumbling something in broken words. Confused, he tilted his head to let the water drain from his ear and politely asked her to repeat herself. He gradually relaxed as she clasped his hand, her eyes welling up with tears to thank him for his help. She sat down without waiting for his reply. Watching her from behind, he started to consider the possibility of becoming friends with her. She wasn't as scary as he'd first thought. Maybe she was even kind. So, he looked down at his hand, red from her tight grip and still damp from the liquid she seemed to be carrying. He paused, realizing her strength matched her powerful presence. He thought about Kamiyama-san, picturing her as a mountain girl, strong and majestic, which made him a little hesitant to approach her. However, his attention shifted when a charming classmate cheerfully asked Kamiyama if she could call her by her first name. Though still bewildered by Kamiyama's unusual aura, he couldn't help but admire the brave girl who was challenging the mountain girl. With confidence, the girl introduced herself as Hinata Arai, extending a friendly invitation for Kamiyama to join her group. Kamiyama, looking shy, hesitated a bit, saying she wasn't good at casual conversation. Arai quickly brushed off her worries, telling her she'd fit right in if she just gave it a try. Listening in, Kominato noticed that Kamiyama's excuse was starting to crumble, especially when Arai pointed towards the other girls who were waiting to welcome Kamiyama. Watching it all unfold, he remained silent, placing a hand on his head, certain that he would never fit into this group. Although Arai was kind and encouraging, he felt uneasy with the wary glances from the other girls. He was also worried by how easily Arai approached Kamiyama, as if she were leading Kamiyama into the light without fully understanding her. To Kominato, it was like inviting a vampire into the daylight just because it seemed like a nice thing to do. Kamiyama's expression changed, surprised, as Arai suddenly reached out to fix her crooked bow, joking about Kamiyama's trembling hands. She reminded Kamiyama that as high school students, they'd be wearing this uniform for 3 years, so they should wear it with respect. Listening closely, Kominato grew even more confused when Arai joked about whether Kamiyama was feeding her uniform or taking it for a walk twice a day. For a moment, he was so confused he wondered if he'd been transported to a world where clothes were alive. His bewilderment deepened when Arai turned to him, smiled brightly, and asked about how he cared for his uniform. At first, he thought he had misheard, but seeing Arai's confident expression, he began to worry that he'd been neglecting his own uniform. Hesitantly, he confessed that his uniform didn't like to eat, only for Arai to laugh and explain that she was asking about how to care for the frayed seams. Embarrassed, he scratched his head, realizing how strange his comment about feeding the uniform sounded. Arai then invited both Kamiyama and Kominato to share their uniform walking routes. But before he could answer, he noticed the other girls exchanging worried glances, silently warning them not to dig any deeper into Arai's weirdness. Realizing he had gotten way too deep into the strange conversation, he quickly grabbed his bag, determined to escape it. As Arai suggested they continue their talk elsewhere, she took Kamiyama's hand, and as she stood up, her chair suddenly tipped backward, sending Kominato crashing painfully to the floor. Kamiyama immediately stood up, wrung the water from her clothes, and apologized. Meanwhile, Kominato, with an anxious smile, waved his hand to dismiss her concern. But when she saw his hand, she suddenly grabbed him by the collar and called for a nurse, stunning everyone. She easily lifted him onto her shoulder and ran outside. Feeling embarrassed about being carried by a girl, he kept quiet, although the curious stares from the other students made him feel even more embarrassed than the pain in his hand. After running for a few minutes, she finally stopped, and he gently pointed out that they'd arrived behind the stadium instead of at the nurse's office. She apologized, admitting she'd gotten lost. He gently asked her to put him down, pointing to his injury and insisting it was fine, while suggesting they return to class. However, his own anxiety spiked when he noticed she was struggling to breathe, as her paper bag mask was soaked through and no longer effective. Panicked, he reached out to take it off, worried for her safety, but she grabbed his hand, insisting she would handle it herself. Kaminato stared at her back, confused by her determination to keep the paper bag on, wondering if it was just simple embarrassment or something deeper. Then he was stunned to see her calmly tear off her wet paper bag, clumsily but decisively, then pull out a new one from a spare sheet of paper she was carrying. Turning back to him, she let out a sigh of relief, having avoided a more serious incident. Still in disbelief at what had just happened, he hesitantly asked if she always carried a spare paper bag. She smiled and explained that when she gets nervous, her bag often gets wet, making it harder to breathe. Amused by her serious answer, he let out a laugh, which made her feel embarrassed. However, he quickly apologized, appreciating her strange determination and secretly impressed by her preparedness as she quickly put on the new bag. Just then, the bell rang, and they exchanged a confused look before she started running in the wrong direction again. This time, he gently guided her back, and they hurried toward the classroom as he peeked inside. Kaminato quickly pulled his hand back when he realized, with a start, that class had already begun. They sat outside the classroom door in the hallway, both too nervous to walk in mid-lesson, knowing that Kamiyama was probably feeling anxious too. He realized the longer they waited, the harder it would be to go in. He suggested they go in, reassuring her to stay calm and stick close to him. She nervously agreed, planning to act natural and give the teacher a simple excuse. They walked in, but upon seeing their classmates and the teacher, his anxiety made him blurt out a bizarre excuse about a desk getting their hands stuck, requiring spray paint from the nurse's office. While she stammered beside him, the teacher laughed and told him to relax, joking that he was like a middle-aged woman struggling with a smartphone. Then she said she'd already heard what happened from Arai-san and told them to take their seats. As he sat down, he whispered his thanks to Arai, who just gave a cheerful nod in return. Noticing his hand, feeling better now that he was seated, Kaminato let out a sigh of relief. Kaminato felt exhausted, even though only a few hours had passed. It felt like 2 months with everything that had happened. His anxiety surged again when he saw Kamiyama's uniform was still soaked, and heard strange sounds coming from her as she gasped for air. Her paper bag was wet, and her skin looked pale. A sense of urgent worry made him consider asking the teacher for help. But he stopped, afraid of exposing her even more to everyone. Then he remembered the large paper bag in his backpack and felt a glimmer of hope. Hoping it could help without a second thought, he hastily pulled out the large paper bag and placed it over her, only to be surprised to see that it was much bigger than her previous one. But his surprise quickly turned to admiration as she skillfully adjusted the bag, making it fit perfectly. She thanked him, but he reminded her to face forward, where his classmates were buzzing about the paper bag she'd just quickly created. When the teacher announced the end of class and reminded everyone to prepare their materials for tomorrow, he felt exhausted and decided to head home right away. However, as he stepped outside, he saw Aikawa walking with a girl. Kaminato smiled wistfully, wishing he could also experience the cheerful company of a girl. On his way home, lost in his thoughts with his hand pressed tightly to his chest, he was startled when someone suddenly grabbed his leg. At first, he mistook his attacker for a Mishura's kappa, but then he realized it was Kamiyama-san, who was profusely thanking him for his help. Embarrassed, he quickly told her to get up, insisting that no thanks were necessary. However, he couldn't help but notice her surprising strength. She insisted on expressing her gratitude and, with stammering words, vowed to do anything to repay him. Stunned, he realized this was the very dream he'd once had. A girl sincerely promising to do anything for him. In a panic, he tried to sneak away, noticing the curious stares of his classmates and their whispers about her drenched appearance, and his obvious role in it. To ease the awkwardness, he quickly suggested she could thank him by treating him to a juice next time. But to his astonishment, she immediately threw him over her shoulder and repeated the word juice before bolting straight for the cafeteria. Despite his pleas for her to stop so he could get his shoes and bag, she was completely focused on her mission, getting him that juice in a rather peculiar way. It felt like his second dream was coming true, though not quite as he had imagined. Finally, she set him down firmly on a park bench. Sitting there, looking up at the sky, he tried to make sense of everything that was happening. She appeared behind him, handing him a can of juice, her eyes resolute. He couldn't help but feel like they looked like a couple as he sat watching her pull a section of her bag aside to drink. She suddenly noticed his bare feet, and without hesitation, she grabbed his leg, asking about it with genuine concern. Realizing the situation, he explained that they were still at school. She quickly apologized, saying her intention was only to thank him, not to cause trouble. He smiled and assured her it was nothing, thanking her for the juice. She seemed a bit nervous, admitting she'd been very scared today, sharing her unease about being around strangers. He was surprised when she effortlessly crushed the juice can, expressing her frustration. She explained that if she hadn't been so nervous, things wouldn't have happened that way. He gently asked if she thought she would feel better once she settled in at school. She nodded, saying she hadn't made any friends yet and had hoped to start the school year without feeling so anxious. Understanding how hard it is to have no friends, he offered to help her make some. She beamed and promised to support him in return. When she asked what he valued in friends, he thought for a moment and replied that he liked people he could talk to without feeling stressed. They looked at each other, realizing they had been able to talk to each other just like that. Overhearing them, a nearby man approached, laughing and declaring that they were already friends, weren't they? He just laughed and joked about his past relationships that had led to trouble. A spark of hope ignited in him. And turning to her, he asked if she would be his friend. Even though it felt a little strange, she smiled warmly, took his hand, and happily agreed. They both smiled, realizing they had each made a friend on their first day of school. The next day, Kominato was feeling a bit bored in class, until Arai-san cheerfully greeted him with a good morning. He unconsciously stood up and bowed, still treating her with the reverence of a new class president. She laughed and encouraged him to just call her by her name. However, he still saw her as the class president and was truly impressed by how she naturally lived up to everyone's expectations. He recalled the day before, when the teacher had asked for a volunteer to be class president. A tense atmosphere filled the room as no one stood up, and he began to worry they would be stuck in that awkward silence. Suddenly, Arai-san raised her hand to volunteer with a confident smile. Kaminato felt relieved and full of admiration, seeing her as a calm, almost godlike presence. She wasn't just beautiful, she embodied all the qualities of an ideal leader. Suddenly, he was snapped out of his thoughts when she bent down to greet Kamiyama-san, the person hiding under their desk, looking embarrassed. Kamiyama awkwardly stood up from her hiding spot and straightened her unbuttoned shirt. Kominato gently advised Arai-san to take it easy, or Kamiyama-san might die of embarrassment. Understanding this, Arai-san smiled warmly, reminding Kamiyama that they had been friends since yesterday. Kominato admired her even more, impressed by her natural ability to connect with people. It took him 2 days to befriend Kamiyama-san, while Arai-san could do it so easily. Arai-san excitedly asked if they wanted to join a school club. Although neither Kominato nor Kamiyama had decided yet, he joked that he wanted to join the GHQ club, go home quickly. However, his mood changed when Arai explained that joining a club was mandatory. Annoyed, he asked her if she had chosen a club yet. Arai thought for a moment and said she wanted to try something new, as she had been in the swimming club in middle school. Arai excitedly suggested they should explore the clubs together. After school, Kominato found it a bit of a hassle and tried to refuse, but Arai was persistent, even inviting Kamiyama, who seemed a bit hesitant but eventually agreed. They decided to check out the clubs after the school bell rang. When the bell rang, Kominato and Kamiyama let Arai-san decide which club to start with. Arai-san cleverly suggested joining a club that encouraged inclusion. So the three of them decided to try the music club first. A club member handed them instruments to try, and the club captain quietly whispered to the other members that they should accept anyone who could make at least one sound, no matter how small, so they wouldn't be short on members. Arai-san took a trumpet and played it beautifully, impressing the teacher and making him wonder if this was really her first time playing. He admired her humility when she credited her success to the instrument rather than her own skill. However, frustration flared up when Kominato struggled with his assigned instrument, and he blamed the club members for giving him a broken one. A student then approached Kamiyama-san, guiding her to try the drums. Shocked, Kominato watched as she enthusiastically slammed her head into the drum instead of using the sticks, causing her to nearly get swallowed by the instrument. With a smile, the person in charge of the club announced that they would not be joining the club. Arai-san was disappointed, but insisted it was the instrument's fault, not Kominato's. Kamiyama excitedly said that it was an instrument for a concerto and praised Kominato's potential. Boosted by her encouragement, Arai-san smiled brightly and suggested they move on to the next club with renewed spirits, ready to face new challenges and discoveries as they flipped through the booklet to find the next one. Kominato initially felt annoyed with the process, but his mood improved whenever he looked at Arai-san, whose presence made him feel more relaxed. Their next stop was the tea club, where Arai-san skillfully prepared a cup of tea. When it was Kamiyama-san's turn, she rushed too much and spilled the tea on him, getting him all wet. Arai-san looked disappointed, thinking their luck wasn't very good, but Arai-san remained determined and suggested they try the next club. They visited the art club and the chorus club, but things didn't go well there either. Arai-san felt discouraged and nearly collapsed from the stress. Noticing her frustration, Kominato quickly caught her, telling her they could keep going and would eventually succeed. Determined not to give up, Kominato tied a bandana around his head for motivation and suggested they try a sports club. Arai-san agreed, thinking Kamiyama's height and strength would be a good advantage. However, when Kamiyama sadly admitted that she wasn't good at sports, Arai-san encouraged her to give it a shot, reminding her that she wouldn't know unless she tried. Kamiyama hesitated and shared that back in middle school, everyone had high expectations for her because of her height and strength, but her anxiety led to failures, including becoming an invisible member of a club. With tears welling up, she confessed that she wanted to participate in high school activities, but was afraid of facing the same fate. She looked down sadly from the railing. Both Kominato and Arai-san felt for her. Kominato thought about how to help her overcome her anxiety, realizing that a smaller club might help her feel less overwhelmed. Meanwhile, Arai-san noticed Kamiyama looking down and leaned over to see. A cheerful girl was happily chatting with everyone. Kamiyama confessed her wish to be like that girl. Arai-san admired the girl's uniform and radiant skin, joking that she must eat very well. After a moment of thought, Kominato suddenly had an idea. He excitedly suggested that instead of joining a club, they could create their own. He enthusiastically explained his idea of creating a space where Kamiyama wouldn't feel anxious. However, his excitement dampened slightly as he worried about the practical issues. Just then, Arai-san stepped forward, remembered something, and opened a book, showing them that it was entirely possible to start their own club. Thrilled by this idea, Kominato felt a wave of joy as Arai-san agreed to help them create the club. Afterwards, Arai-san asked Kominato what kind of club he was thinking of, joking that it shouldn't be like the GHQ club. The three of them brainstormed ideas for a club that would be fun for everyone without being too tiring. After a long discussion, however, they still hadn't decided on a name. Kamiyama, feeling guilty for holding things up, hesitantly apologized, sweating nervously. Arai reassured her, saying it was okay because they were already friends. Inspired by Kamiyama's words about friendship and communication, Kominato suddenly became excited and proposed they create a conversation club. He enthusiastically asked what they thought of the idea. Both girls were very surprised by the idea of a conversation club, but Kominato didn't stop. elaborating on Arai's theory that friendship begins with conversation. He argued passionately that effective communication is key, emphasizing the need for interaction in society. In his mind, he pictured a harmonious school life if the girls improved their communication skills. With a final persuasive plea, he stressed the importance of honing their ability to communicate. To his surprise, Arai, thoroughly impressed, walked over to him and agreed that communication skills were indeed very important. She then turned to Kamiyama, asking for her opinion on the club idea. Kamiyama nodded hopefully, seeing this as a chance to improve her skills and maybe speak more comfortably. Excited, Kominato suggested they should do it, ensuring that the club's goal would get support from everyone. Kamiyama bowed gratefully, thanking him for being considerate of her struggles, though her face remained hidden behind the paper bag. Kominato wondered if she was smiling underneath it. Then, out of curiosity, he asked if she might take the bag off when she felt confident talking. But when she anxiously clutched the bag and stammered a refusal, he quickly apologized, worried he had pushed her too far. They went to the faculty room, where the teacher found their idea for a conversation club interesting, but informed them they needed 4 members to officially form the club. This made them anxious. On their way back, Arai asked Kominato if he had any other friends. He thought for a moment, then apologized, admitting that so far, he had only made friends with Kamiyama. Arai also sighed and explained that her friends had already chosen their clubs. Seeing their concern, Kominato wondered if anyone would actually be interested in joining their club. Just then, Kamiyama reluctantly mentioned that she knew someone who might be interested, which made Kominato feel a fleeting pang of sadness at the thought that she might have a whole group of friends. But Arai was immediately delighted, encouraging Kamiyama to invite the person before she joined another club. Wasting no time, Kamiyama quickly hoisted Kominato onto her shoulders, and they rushed off to meet this potential friend. When they arrived, she set him down in the hallway and pointed towards a girl in a pink cardigan, who was talking confidently. Kominato was surprised, wondering if she was friends with someone so normal. However, Arai happily recognized the girl as the one who had looked at them in the hallway earlier. She complimented Kamiyama on her impressive choice of friends, and eagerly asked if she was really Kamiyama's friend. But Kamiyama, looking uncomfortable, explained that she only knew the girl a little, thinking she would be a perfect fit for their club. When they turned back, they saw the girl chatting animatedly with A-chan, who was half hidden behind a pillar and barely visible. They overheard snippets of her conversation about things like nice hair and weight, and he realized with renewed hope that this girl seemed to have no trouble talking to anyone. Arai encouraged Kamiyama to invite her, but she got flustered and protested that she couldn't, looking worried as she spoke. Seeing her discomfort, Arai agreed that adding someone new to the group might be a bit awkward. Suddenly, as the 2 girls were talking, Kominato observed the situation and realized that the girl was the only one speaking, as he couldn't hear any response from the other one. But then, the girl suddenly noticed him looking and glared at him, muttering about some weirdo watching them. Embarrassed, he started to introduce himself, but then he saw A-chan, who literally had wheels instead of feet and a 2D face. Stunned, he cried out while Arai stood there, also surprised to realize that A-chan was just a cardboard cutout. Regaining his composure, he reminded himself not to get sidetracked, while Kamiyama found it quite amusing that she could hold a conversation with a cardboard model, which spoke to her social energy. He saw this girl as the perfect candidate for their conversation club. As the girl started to walk away, Kamiyama quickly urged him on, telling him he had to recruit her. Despite his nerves, he gathered his courage and ran after her. As he approached the girl, he mentally prepared himself to give up his peaceful life to join the conversation club. He introduced himself and asked her to hear him out, but when the girl turned around, a sharp beam of light immediately shot from her eyes, nearly hitting him. He recoiled, feeling defeated and a little angry, realizing he couldn't talk to her at all. Noticing Arai was still frozen in shock, he suggested Kamiyama give it a try instead. Although terrified, she bravely approached the girl, sweat starting to bead on her forehead and soak through her paper bag. She bowed awkwardly, trying to invite the girl to join the conversation club. Meanwhile, he watched through his fingers, worried because the girl looked less like a friendly classmate and more like a ghost. Fortunately, the girl just frowned. Clearly unimpressed by the invitation from a total stranger, Kamiyama stepped back, visibly disappointed by her failure. He comforted her, admiring her bravery and noting that this new girl, despite her intimidating approach, didn't flinch at all. It was clear she hadn't joined any clubs, making her an ideal candidate for theirs. Finally, as Arai snapped out of her shock, she suggested the group try again, this time with a full coordinated effort. Encouraged, they rallied their spirits and with renewed determination, prepared to make one final push to recruit this powerful and somewhat terrifying prospect. Arai approached the girl with her most polite and friendly demeanor, even asking if she could talk to her 2D friend, Achan. The girl turned and said that Achan wouldn't want to talk, but Arai insisted, with a bright smile, that she really wanted to chat and also asked for the girl's name. Kamiyama watched intently from the sidelines, observing the interaction as if through a microscope, after realizing she was being met with silence. Arai glanced at Kamiyama, who cleverly brandished a large notebook full of helpful tips, signaling her to clarify their eagerness to talk. Taking the hint, Arai turned back to the girl, gently restating her desire to connect, while Kamiyama and Kominato played the role of a cheer squad in the background, fueling her courage. They even showed Arai another page in the notebook, suggesting a finishing blow. Without hesitation, Arai gently took the girl's hand, warmly affirming that they needed her in their club, once again asking for her name. Finally, with her face slightly flushed and sweating from the pressure, the girl quietly introduced herself as Amano Haru and asked if they really needed her. The trio cheered and introduced themselves, but when Arai introduced Kominato to the girl, she once again shot a death ray from her eyes, scorching the floor as Kominato barely dodged it, wondering why she attacked him. Before Kominato could even open his mouth, Arai, unfazed, put a hand on Amano's shoulder, declaring that they were friends now and encouraging her to join their club. Kamiyama, equally enthusiastic, added that she strongly believed it would be fun to have long conversations with everyone. Although Amano-san appreciated their enthusiasm, she clutched her 2D cutout and politely declined, explaining she couldn't join a club with boys in it. As Amano-san refused, both girls turned to look at Kominato, making him feel even more self-conscious. Noticing his sad expression, Kamiyama bravely asked her why she couldn't be in a club with boys. Amano grimaced, looking thoughtful as if unsure, before finally answering with a serious expression that she couldn't because boys would start talking to her. Kominato, confused by this reasoning, unintentionally asked if gender really mattered that much, and was immediately met with a blinding death ray from her, which he scrambled to avoid. Feeling anxious about her uncontrollable laser eyes, he didn't know what to do next. Amano hid her eyes as Kominato, panicked, swore to stay away from talking to her ever again. To ease the tension, Arai stepped in, complimenting her cute and shy personality, adding that it must be tiring to avoid constant attention. Amano, still embarrassed by the compliment, glanced at her 2D friend, Ah-chan, and relented, saying that while she was moved, she still couldn't join a club with a boy in it. Seeing Amano's hesitation because of Kominato, Arai cheerfully proposed a deal. She could join if there was a rule that Kominato wasn't allowed to talk to her during club activities. Stunned, Kominato immediately protested, saying this violated his fundamental right to speak in the club. However, Arai calmly explained that conversation doesn't always have to be verbal. Just then, Kominato unconsciously lifted his leg as a deadly flash of light shot out from beneath it. He yelled out in frustration, accusing her of trying to attack him when he hadn't said a thing to her. But Arai quickly stepped in to smooth things over. However, when he saw Amano's face fall, looking incredibly sad, Kominato was taken aback. The other girls quickly signaled for him to be quiet, worried that she might be about to cry. Kamiyama suggested they should cheer her up. and Kominato found it ironic that everyone was trying to make her laugh, even though she had just tried to attack him for talking. Arai gently took Amano's hand, smiled, and apologized, explaining that the flashes only appeared when she was startled. She sympathetically suggested that maybe the feeling of being interrupted was what caused the flash to appear. Amano was so moved she was on the verge of tears, but Arai comforted her, saying that even her flashes of light would be welcome in the club. With a playful smile, Arai suggested she could wear electromagnetic armor, joking that she'd try to build some. Then Kamiyama cheerfully chimed in, suggesting they get crepes after the club meeting. But as soon as she let go of Amano's hand, Amano winced because Kamiyama had held it a little too tightly. Things got awkward, and no one knew what to do next. Kominato appeared in a black suit, joking that he was the seaweed warrior and asking if eating it would improve his algebra grade. Both girls' eyes widened in astonishment as he suddenly blurted out such an irrelevant joke. Breathing a sigh of relief when he saw Amano didn't shoot a flash of light this time, he carefully took off his mask, but she immediately lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar with a stern look in her eyes. Amano stared at him and warned him not to spout such nonsense again, revealing with a scowl that she hated jokes. Determined to try one last time, Kominato forced a stiff smile and, in a bit of desperation, made up a story about how seaweed lovers are often ridiculed, but a corrupt monk went to buy seaweed from a pot-bellied man. As he told it, he felt embarrassed for mentioning seaweed so many times, but he still glanced over to see Amano's reaction. She immediately snapped at him to stop, declaring that she really disliked such things. Overcome with embarrassment, Kominato covered his face, realizing he had probably gone too far in trying to make her laugh. However, Arai nudged him, pointing out that Amano seemed to be on the verge of laughing. This gave him a burst of motivation. Encouraged, Kominato started humming a silly tune about the corrupt, seaweed-loving monk. Surprisingly, Amano gave a slight bow, looking appreciative, even though she had called him a degenerate monk just moments before. This left him confused, as he realized she seemed to be enjoying it, despite having just declared that she hated jokes. As he was wondering if making her laugh was really that difficult, Amano suddenly asked with a curious look if the monk managed to buy the seaweed. Staying in character, he answered, "No," and she unexpectedly teared up. Trying to reassure her, he insisted it was a meaningful and wholesome story. They continued their chat until Arai, who had been watching, chimed in. She remarked with satisfaction that Amano hadn't shot out any deadly flashes of light, implying that laughter, empathy, and a humorous topic had made her comfortable around Kominato. Arai suggested that they had probably become friends. Kominato bowed his head, quietly expressing that he was willing to accept her flashes of light if it meant they could be friends. Moved by his willingness, Amano decided to accept Kominato as a friend. Hugging her 2D friend, Ah-chan, tightly, she declared she would join the club, as she had been looking for a place where A-chan could also belong. Overjoyed, Arai almost pulled Amano into a hug and cheerfully asked her to write her name on the class roster. Watching the two girls filled with happiness, Kominato and Kamiyama also cheered, celebrating the official start of the conversation club. Deeply moved, Kamiyama expressed that club activities had once been a distant dream, and she was so happy that this dream had become a reality. Overjoyed, Kominato asked with a hint of curiosity about her other dreams. Kamiyama sighed and confessed that if she ever took the paper bag off her head, her remaining dreams would be very small and easy to accomplish. Then, with a touch of sadness, she revealed that many people had advised her to remove the paper bag if she truly wanted to achieve her dreams. She'd considered it, but never had the courage to go through with it. With sincere gratitude, she reached out her hand, thanking him for helping her realize a wish without asking her to remove the paper bag. Overjoyed, she called him her hero. A little flustered at first, Kominato blushed at her words, and humbly explains he's not really a hero, since heroes usually save people in real danger. However, he happily declares he's her friend, promising to help her anytime. Even though he couldn't see her expression under the paper bag, He could tell his words had made her genuinely happy. After overcoming a series of challenges and near misses with danger, they finally felt a sense of complete joy. Their communication club was officially established. Excited to start their first activity, Kominato was met with silence. Amano was busy giggling and chatting with Achan about shopping and fashion, while Arai cheerfully encouraged him to do his best. Despite his exhaustion, he felt a little relieved by her support. However, anxiety began to creep in when he realized Kamiyama had disappeared, even though she had been sitting nearby just a few minutes ago. He went to look for Kamiyama and found her trying to hide. When he asked what was wrong, she stammered that it was their first club activity and she was feeling nervous. Encouraging her to join, Kominato then approached Amano, suggesting they start their first session. In response, Amano hugged Achan tightly, angrily calling him useless for trying to communicate with her. Kominato was disappointed, feeling the pressure of not being able to start the club without her participation. However, upon seeing his dejected expression, Amano reluctantly agreed to go along with his suggestion, though only for a short time. Though he found it hard to read the room, Kominato focused on getting everyone's attention and proposed a simple topic for discussion. He invited the members to raise their hands if they had an idea, but immediately, Amano shouted, questioning if he was thinking of something improper. To ease the tension, he quickly pulled out a suggestion box, inviting everyone to write down their ideas on small slips of paper. The members all complied. Kominato opened the box and pulled out the first slip. His eyes widened as he read the contents. Discuss the terrible things about Kominato-kun. He glanced at Amano, certain she was the one behind the suggestion. Although she strongly denied it, she couldn't hide her smile, even adding that it was an excellent topic for discussion. Annoyed, he tore up the paper and rejected the idea, causing Amano to scream that she had poured her heart and soul into it. Making it clear she was the author of the proposal, he moved on to the second slip, this time a proposal to discuss JIS standards in uniforms. Arai immediately raised her hand, claiming she wrote it, which Kominato had already guessed. When Amano asked what JIS standards were, Arai passionately explained that JIS stands for Japanese Industrial Standards, established by the responsible cabinet minister, and that it's a national standard of Japan. Despite Arai's enthusiasm, Kominato cut her off in frustration, saying it wasn't a suitable topic for the club. Arai's face fell as she apologized, realizing the box was empty and there were no truly viable ideas for their first club meeting. Kominato decided to review all the suggestions at once. Just then, Kominato announced that if they didn't decide on a topic soon, he would have to go home. As Amano picked up the box, she noticed it was surprisingly heavier than usual. When she tilted it, a water-soaked piece of paper slid out, dissolving into pulp. Kamiyama-san stared at the sight, tears welling up in her eyes as she apologized, explaining she'd been so nervous that this happened. Thinking about the situation, Kominato realized that keeping the ideas anonymous wasn't really necessary. Immediately, Amano-san yelled at him, mocking him for not contributing anything and calling him useless. Without missing a beat, he quickly shot back sarcastically, telling her to just label him stupid if she wanted. To his surprise, she agreed with him without hesitation, which he couldn't help but find amusing. Kominato carefully observed Amano-san and realized that despite her seemingly shy demeanor at first, she actually possessed a hidden talent for communication that she was deliberately hiding. This made her an interesting mystery to be solved. Kominato suggested the group focus on basic conversation topics, like favorite foods or movies, thinking they would be more approachable. The group's surprise at the suggestion left him feeling a bit disappointed, realizing they hadn't even considered such everyday topics. Both nervous and excited, he began sharing his own favorite foods and subjects, revealing he liked math and loved curry and hamburger steak. Arai was surprised, shocked to learn he liked math, as she struggled with it. He explained that math didn't require much memorization, which made it more interesting for him. As usual, Amano-san teased him about his taste in food, saying that not even an elementary schooler would choose dishes like that. He retorted that they were just basic, normal dishes. However, she became flustered and a little panicked when he asked about her favorite food. After some hesitation, she admitted she likes spaghetti and parfaits, because that's what girls like. Immediately, he started teasing her, saying she must like all foods that start with the letter P, like panties. She nodded in agreement, saying she eats them like a girl, but immediately realized the true meaning of his words. Her face turned bright red as Kominato burst out laughing, leaving her to scream in anger that he had tricked her into saying it. While they were having their playful argument, Arai innocently asked if she preferred cotton or nylon panties, causing Amano to furiously shout that she doesn't eat them. Turning back to Kominato, she tried to explain her other food preferences. But just then, Kamiyama interrupted, asking her what she really wanted to eat right now. Her expression changed, shifting to confusion and surprise, as if the world around her had vanished, leaving her all alone. Noticing her distress, Kominato reassured her that it was okay if she didn't want to answer. Gathering all her courage, she confessed in a choked-up voice that she had found it very difficult to make friends in elementary and middle school, and that she was determined to change that in high school. She had gone to the library to look for books, only to find that her classmates had already formed close-knit groups of friends. Overwhelmed, she cried, lamenting that she couldn't approach anyone. But in her loneliness, she found a paper cutout of A-chan to talk to, which brought her joy and helped ease her anxiety. She shared that A-chan had become her friend, but even so, she realized that no one else was interested in being friends with her. Seeing her sad face, Kominato felt a pang of sadness and tried to comfort her, understanding her difficulties, but also unable to feel entirely sorry for her. She quickly reassured everyone that A-chan was now her best friend, and they didn't need to worry about her. Just then, Kamiyama stepped forward, sharing that although she wasn't good at talking to people, she could understand them. With newfound encouragement, Kamiyama raised her hand and gave a thumbs up, which encouraged her and made her respond in kind, tears of joy falling. She called Kamiyama her second friend after A-chan and expressed her gratitude. This left Arai and Kominato feeling confused and a little annoyed, as they thought they were already her friends. Wiping away her tears, she innocently explained that they had become friends because they wanted her to join their group. Recognizing her sincerity, both Arai and Kominato held out their hands to her, eager to solidify their friendship. With a flushed face and overcome with emotion, she finally took their hands, marking an unforgettable day full of friendship. As the school bell rang, signaling the end of the fourth lesson and the start of lunch, Kominato eagerly grabbed his bento box, planning to eat quickly and then take a nap. But just as he looked down, a strange noise caught his attention. Turning around, he was stunned to see Kamiyama approaching, holding her entire desk like a lantern with her bento box on top of it. Tears were streaming down her face and there seemed to be something red on her bag. She asked if they could have lunch together. Seeing this sight, he was a little surprised but quickly agreed, asking her to stop scaring him. A moment later, Arai cheerfully joined in, bringing her own bento box, eager to share the meal with everyone. Arai noticed Kamiyama's bento box with a bear pattern and immediately complimented it, saying she loved everything with bears on it. Kamiyama was pleased with the compliment, explaining that although real bears are strong and scary, they become adorable when turned into characters. She added that it's wonderful to be able to love animals that way. Arai joined the conversation, mentioning how teddy bears started the trend of making everything cute. While holding his chopsticks, Kominato casually shared his view that anything fluffy, not just bears, can be cute. Kamiyama then asked with genuine curiosity if she would be cute if she were fluffy, imagining herself as a strong bear hiding behind a paper bag. Kominato, slightly panicked, advised her to give up on the idea of wanting to be cute and to embrace her own strength instead. Arai also smiled and reassured Kamiyama that she was already very cute in her own unique way. Just then, Amano entered the classroom with A-chan in her hand, laughing and sharing her hatred for pineapple and sweet and sour pork, saying they were horrible. Even worse was pork with pineapple. At that moment, the entire class was still lost in their own conversations, and no one paid any attention to Amano and Achan. Kaminato realized they had gotten used to Amano's antics and were even making space for Achan, as if she were a real student. He was impressed by her confidence as she walked into the room, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, even though she had to pass through other classrooms to get there. Finally, Amano set Achan down in front of their desk, and without looking at the three of them, asked if Achan had done her homework. Amano decided for herself that Achan had, and immediately asked if she could copy Achan's work. The three of them sat eating and watching, realizing she was putting on an act, pretending as if she really hated doing homework. However, her mood quickly shifted, and she started to tear up, confessing brokenly to Achan that she was a member of the conversation club, but felt sad because she was the only one who was never invited to join a conversation. All of this happened without her ever looking at them. Amano began to cry harder, turning to Kaminato and accusing him of not inviting her, then dramatically warning him that she might just kill him one day. Realizing she was dead serious, Kaminato immediately covered his face, half expecting Amano to shoot a laser beam at him. But instead, she just sighed and sadly admitted that she had turned down other invitations before. At this, Amano immediately piped up, declaring that the more, the merrier, and she agreed to join them. Kaminato felt relieved to see her back in high spirits as he opened his lunchbox. Amano enthusiastically praised Kaminato's sandwiches and asked about the ingredients. Amano cheerfully pointed to one sandwich and saw it had pickled melon radish inside, and another had a potato croquette. Noticing Kaminato's hesitant expression, she offered him another sandwich, proudly saying it had butter and was especially delicious. Kaminato took a bite and was pleasantly surprised by how good it was. As the whole club sat together, Amano suggested they discuss activities for the May holidays. Kaminato, however, felt a bit bummed out about having to do club activities during his free time. Arai eagerly agreed with Amano, and even Kamiyama, who didn't have any other plans, chimed in when they mentioned going with the majority rule. Kaminato was surprised, realizing they had already decided. Without his input, he half-heartedly suggested that they should focus on the club's weaknesses, just like other clubs do during long breaks. Arai caught on to his idea and pointed out that the club lacked a proper room, and they would probably have to hold their activities outdoors. The girls quickly agreed on the idea of going shopping. This left Kaminato feeling confused, wondering how this solved any of the club's weaknesses. Seeing his puzzled look, Amano told a story. She explained that shopping was actually a challenge for her. She recalled that every time she asked Achan for shopping advice, the store clerks seemed to vanish. She remembered one time when, right after asking Achan a question in front of a store, the clerk promptly disappeared, forcing her to go home empty-handed. Realizing that Achan might be scaring the staff away, Kaminato could only look at her in silent amazement, feeling a little sympathetic. Kamiyama also shared her own shopping difficulties, explaining that her anxiety often caused her to buy everything in a panic. Kamiyama had even been refused entry to stores for covering her face too much. When Kaminato asked if their holiday would be entirely focused on shopping, Kamiyama enthusiastically mentioned an outfit she was determined to buy if they all went together. The other girls became emotional, leaving Kaminato confused until Amano suddenly spoke up, accusing him of underestimating the difficulty of clothes shopping. Kaminato suggested it would be easier if the store staff approached them, but she immediately shot that down, explaining that aggressive sales tactics just made her buy things she didn't want or need. Kamiyama then admitted that she avoided trying on clothes in the store for fear they would get damp, so she usually shopped online instead, which sometimes resulted in the clothes not fitting. Arai, looking a bit frazzled, admitted that she struggled with even talking to store clerks. Listening to their worries, Kaminato reluctantly agreed that shopping really did seem daunting. Noticing his doubt, Amano got a little angry. quickly clarifying that she wasn't scared of the changing rooms. When he teased her by mentioning rumors about people disappearing in fitting rooms, her terrified expression made him concede that while ghosts might be scary, it's people who are the truly terrifying ones. He then recounted his own horror story: customers who try on countless outfits, take selfies, and then leave without buying anything. The feeling disgusted him. The girls, understanding his pain, sighed, agreeing that maybe shopping wasn't as fun as they'd thought. To lighten the mood, Kominato encouraged them to pursue Kamiyama's goal, but she humbly declined, not wanting to be a burden. With a hopeful smile, Amano suggested a different kind of activity she had always wanted to try: the crepe stand by the station after school. Arai's eyes immediately lit up, enthusiastically agreeing with the idea, and even mentioning the food truck near the station, where they could avoid the hassle of dealing with too many staff. Amano smiled brightly, eagerly asking Kamiyama if she liked crepes, and Kamiyama nodded enthusiastically. Although Kaminato wasn't a fan of sweets, he couldn't help but feel happy seeing how excited the girls were. In the end, the group agreed to go to the crepe stand after school. When the final bell rang, Kominato was stunned to see the girls preparing as if they were heading into battle. Not just a simple outing. Kamiyama, for instance, brought a paper bag she had specially prepared for the occasion, earning compliments from the others on how cute and stylish it was. Kominato was still bewildered, watching the girls lugging huge shoulder bags with focused expressions, clearly prepared for something more than just a trip to a crepe stand. When the group finally arrived at the crowded crepe shop, it was the club's first official outing. Kominato felt a thought flash through his mind again. Were they really just going for crepes, or was there something more hidden behind it all? Kaminato let out a sigh of relief. Surrounded by a sea of people, there wasn't a single empty seat in sight. He was just thankful that nothing strange had happened yet. Meanwhile, he enjoyed watching the girls passionately debate their topping choices: strawberry, cream, banana, or other delicious options. As they chattered excitedly, he couldn't help but chuckle at their enthusiasm. Although it was a bit weird, he told himself they were just normal high school girls. Suddenly, Arai turned to him with a bright smile and asked what he was going to order. He hesitated, joking that he'd just get what she was having, since he couldn't make sense of all the options. However, Amano misunderstood, thinking he wanted to get the same thing as her, and blushed. Flustered, she started rambling about how ordering the same thing would make them look like a couple. While Kominato hurriedly tried to clear things up, Amano's expression showed she was ready to shoot him a death glare. Suddenly, he was distracted by a splash of water. It was Kamiyama. Her handbag was wet, and she was struggling to place her order, unable to speak as she fumbled. Amano and Arai quickly rushed over to comfort Kamiyama, helping her dry off and encouraging her gently. Kominato stood by and watched, feeling both amused and impressed by the girls' friendship. Amano, with a determined look, offered a unique tip to help Kamiyama with her anxiety. Imagine everyone around her was just Achan. To Kaminato's surprise, Kamiyama's anxiety seemed to melt away, and she regained her composure. In high spirits, Arai decided to take the lead, marveling at the delicious-looking crepes and urging everyone to order before it got even more crowded. Empowered by her small victory, Amano excitedly announced that she would order the special custard cream just for herself. However, before she could dash off on her own, Kominato shouted a warning, reminding her that she might be in danger if she pushed through the crowd without Achan by her side. Amano turned back, with a resolute look in her eyes, insisting that they had to trust her serious expression. She was ready to face this challenge alone. With full concentration, Amano approached the food truck. But as soon as she saw the cheerful owner standing there, she faltered. She tried to place her order, but the owner cut her off, smiling brightly and saying how cute she was, offering her a special discount. Before Amano could explain her choice, the owner insisted that tropical fruits were the perfect choice for her skin and hands, then handed her a giant crepe, the special Heaven Pegasus, along with a Guten tag. Amano was so flustered that she ended up buying the enormous dessert. And when she returned to the group with teary eyes, she told Kamiyama it was her turn. Kamiyama was clearly nervous too, but Amano begged her to get revenge for her. With newfound determination, Kamiyama swore to conquer the crepe, declaring that she had a foolproof plan. She stuck a small black sticker on her shirt to enhance her cuteness, hoping it would give her an advantage. Kominato tried to intervene, but Amano quickly placed a hand on his shoulder, warning him not to doubt the strategy she had carefully prepared. Miraculously, they watched as Kamiyama went up and, to everyone's surprise, succeeded in ordering the crepe she actually wanted. When it was Kominato's turn, he nervously approached the food truck, trying to act calm as he began to tell the owner his choice. However, his hand trembled, and he accidentally dropped a coin. He watched in horror as it rolled all the way to the end of the truck. Frustrated, he bent down to pick it up but realized the coin was out of reach. Unexpectedly, Kamiyama appeared, gently lifting the entire food truck to retrieve the coin for him. Kominato was stunned and thanked her as she handed it back. When Kominato stood up to order, he noticed the owner stumbling inside the truck, clearly shocked by Kamiyama's strength. The owner regained his balance and asked Kominato what he wanted, but Kominato stammered, nervously noticing the owner was clutching his hand with a tearful smile. The owner declared that his hands could only make the super extra large special with tropical fruits, automatically deciding Kominato's order for him. Even though Kominato had a different dessert in mind, he found himself holding a giant crepe filled with fruit. The supersized portion was so big Kominato could barely carry it. As each member of the group returned with their own giant crepe, Arai smiled with excitement, while a still teary Amano vowed to win next time. In the end, they all had a great time on their trip, learned a lot, and enjoyed a special adventure together. They ended the day with Arai still scolding Kominato for copying her order, while Kominato apologized sheepishly, making for a light-hearted end to the club's first outing. The next day, Kominato entered the bustling marketplace for the Conversation Club's activity. Overwhelmed by the crush of people during the holiday, surprisingly, the crowd suddenly parted, making way for him. Breathing a sigh of relief, he saw Amano chatting with Achan about their favorite action movies and battles, while Kamiyama, dressed simply but still wearing her familiar paper bag, walked beside her. Realizing that the crowd was avoiding them because of the two girls' unique presence, Kominato felt more at ease. As he got closer and apologized for being late, the girls reassured him that they had just arrived too. However, Kamiyama's mystery drink had long since evaporated, implying they had actually been waiting for him for about 30 minutes. Amano, with an overly worried expression, joked that she thought he'd been kidnapped by a serial killer and probably had his face peeled off. Kominato laughed, asking if she was living in the same Japan as him. Amano immediately shot back, loudly insisting you could never be sure, adding that it's not like it's impossible. When Kominato thanked Amano for worrying about him, she got flustered, suddenly unleashing a flash of light that sent him sprawling to the ground, joking that he was bleeding. Amano hastily clarified that she was only worried because they were club members. Changing the subject, Kominato asked about Arai, and just as Kamiyama was about to answer, Arai appeared, apologizing for being late because she had spent too much time deciding what to wear. Kominato, bewildered, pointed out that Arai was still in her school uniform. With an innocent look, Arai grabbed her clothes and insisted that this was her usual outfit, cheerfully adding that it was also her holiday uniform. Her enthusiasm left everyone a little baffled. Still puzzled by Arai's insistence on wearing her uniform for every occasion, Kominato suggested she try wearing something other than her school uniform. Arai's jaw dropped in surprise as she confessed that the thought had never even crossed her mind. In high spirits, they officially began their club activity, armed with magnifying glasses as they scoured a clothing store. Amano had already spotted something she wanted to buy, but they all reminded themselves that their mission was to shop within their budget. The Preservation Club had a clear mission, and the group was determined to stick to their goal, no matter what the sales staff suggested. When Kominato asked Kamiyama if she needed to take off the paper bag on her head to check her measurements in the store, she looked as excited as if she just had a brilliant idea. Amano, full of confidence, also shared her plan to go into the store with Kamiyama without Achan. Kominato and Arai went in first and were greeted by a sales assistant. Still, Kominato couldn't help but worry about the other two. The sales assistant, noticing their peculiar outfits, politely asked about their clothing preferences and joked about whether they had come straight from a club activity. Unable to hold it in, the whole group burst out laughing, feeling like their little adventure was off to a fun start. Arai quickly explained to the employee that they were, in fact, still in club activity mode. Mustering a bit of courage, Kominato added that the club's work wouldn't be done until everyone got home safely. Realizing her usual sales tactics weren't working, the employee began to adjust her approach. The sales assistant smiled, said she'd be nearby, and reminded them not to hesitate to ask for anything before walking away. Kominato was genuinely impressed by her communication skills, always having the perfect answer for every question. But just then, he was surprised to see Kamiyama enter the store, wearing a cute hat that subtly hid her face after the incident at the crepe shop. His relief quickly turned to worry when he realized Amano had completely disappeared. Just a moment later, Kominato saw Kamiyama holding a cute outfit, asking for someone's opinion. As he leaned in closer, he realized Amano was hiding right behind Kamiyama, the two of them executing a clever double coat tactic. When the sales assistant approached and suggested a brightly colored shirt that would complement Kamiyama's skin tone, it was Amano, still hidden, who politely declined. Kominato crept closer to Amano, whispering that he agreed with the employee's comment about the color suiting her skin, but also encouraged her to pick the color she liked best. Noticing their determination, the sales assistant smiled faintly and left them to choose on their own. Amano, though still a little shy, finally decided on a pink shirt with a prominent tiger print. When they got to the checkout counter, the two girls skillfully executed their disguise. Kamiyama wore her hat pulled down to hide her face, while Amano paid with one hand and secretly held the new shirt with the other. Kominato couldn't help but smile, seeing Amano so happy to have picked out something she liked. Arai playfully winked, cheering for Amano's victory. But Amano emotionally admitted that she couldn't have done it without Achan by her side. Kominato comforted and encouraged Amano, telling her she should be proud for daring to choose something she truly loved. Amano smiled gratefully, her eyes shimmering with emotion. Kamiyama chimed in, praising Amano for successfully completing her shopping mission. Blushing, Amano gently nudged Kamiyama, reminding her that it was her turn to try. She promised Kamiyama that, if needed, Kominato would be there to help. Kamiyama took a deep breath, preparing to face her own shopping challenge. The others watched intently, full of hope and ready to cheer her on.